I talked before about expecting great things from God and attempting great things for God. That's a quote by William Carey. And I want to talk to you for a few moments about greatness today. Let's look at John chapter 13, verse 2. And it says, it was time for supper, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot to betray Jesus. And Jesus knew that the Father had given him authority over everything. Now, this is just before Jesus goes to the cross and dies for the sin of all humanity. And that he knew that he'd come from God and would return to God. So he got up from the table, took off his robe, wrapped a towel around his waist, and poured water into a bowl. Then he began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with a towel wrapped around him. Now, I've got a question this morning. What would you do if you knew that all authority and all power in the whole world had been given to you? What would be the first thing you would do with that? It's a question we need to think about, because Jesus didn't say, well, now I'm going to go and cure, COVID or cancer or heart disease. His first act, I'm not going to go and get even with all those people that offended me. I'm not going to go and make a lot of money or something. No. The first thing that Jesus did when he knew that all authority and power had been given to him was he humbled himself and began to serve his disciples and wash their feet, which is an ultimate act of servitude and servanthood, the ultimate act. So it's a really important thing. That's one of the things that sets Jesus apart from other great leaders. He did that. I want us to unpack that for a moment this morning, a few moments, because I believe that one of the things Jesus came to do was to give us a new definition of greatness. And it's not, friends, I don't think we should be saying, like in our culture and society from God, our culture is driving people actually away from greatness, towards mediocrity. We don't want people to stand out anymore. We don't want there to be winners and losers, because that's just too hard to handle, and it's not politically expedient, maybe. We don't, like anyone's watched the American election, probably has heard more than you ever want to handle in your lifetime of political expediency and political correctness, and we have enough of it in Australia. But on one hand, we look up to great achievers, while at the same time removing competition from our education system, because we don't want winners and losers. That's just the way it is. Now, greatness is not the same as being famous, by the way. Famous is what you do for yourself. Greatness is what you do for others. This is the model that Jesus gave us. It's what I want to talk about this morning for a few moments. So when the young shepherd boy, David, began to develop the heart for God, and worship, that will ultimately lead him to become a king. It wasn't on a public stage. It was nothing about the acknowledgement of other people. There was no one there. When he killed a lion and a bear, the only person watching was God. No one else around. And he did these amazing acts of heroism, and he overcame, he conquered animals that you can't in natural human strength do that. There was no applause, there was no audience. Only God saw what David was doing. He was becoming a warrior, and then he became a king, but he never stopped being a servant. And here's a question this morning. I'm going to try and be brief with this. Why do we struggle with Jesus' words in Mark chapter 9, where Jesus said this, if anyone wants to be first among you? Let's read this, Mark chapter 9, verse 33. After they'd arrived at Capernaum and settled in a house, Jesus asked his disciples, what were you discussing out on the road? But they didn't answer, because they'd been arguing about who would be the greatest among them. And so he sat down, called the 12 disciples over to him, made himself comfortable on a chair, said, whoever wants to be the first must take the last place and be the servant of everyone else. Now, this is an absolutely key scripture for us to read here in the Bible. So when Jesus confronted their desire to take the place of honor, He didn't tell them, stop aspiring to be great. See that? He says, if anyone wants to be the greatest, this is how you do it. He didn't say, stop wanting to be great. So I want to tell you, friends, when our culture and our society says, forget about greatness, we should all be mediocre, that's wrong. God says, yes, you should be great. You should be awesome. And this is how you do it. He simply redirected them so they could succeed in their pursuit of greatness. They actually wanted to be great. And Jesus told them how to be great. So he never discouraged his disciples from wanting to be first. He simply told them what first looks like in God's economy. He never tried to diminish their ambition. He wasn't trying to replace greatness with servanthood. He was trying to give us a new definition of greatness, which is servanthood, serving. That's what Jesus said to his disciples. And that's a powerful thing. A new definition of greatness that Jesus came to give us, which is serving. Such a powerful thing. I believe he also came to give us a new definition of belonging. Belonging. And part of my mission here this morning is to convince you to stop attending church. Now, what I mean is stop just attending church. Stop just going, because I tell you what, Jesus never invited anyone to attend any of his functions. And he had thousands and thousands of people attend his meetings and heard him speak and, saw the miracles and saw the sick healed and saw people, he fed them, he cast out demons, he raised them up. There was all sorts of things that happened. Thousands of people attended, but he never sent out flyers and brochures saying, hey, please come, I'm catching up with, I'm going to be speaking down on the corner of, First and Sinai Parade next week. Why don't you come along there? He never ever did that. He never called people to attend his meetings. He said, follow me. I want you to be a follower of me. Jesus said that. He was looking for something much deeper than merely attending the meetings. Because, friend, it's easy to attend something, isn't it? You can go to, a presentation or something, or you can go to a meeting, or you can attend, but that's not what Jesus was looking for. He said, follow me. Let's read it. Matthew chapter 4, verse 18. Walking along the beach of Lake Galilee, Jesus saw two brothers, Simon, later called Peter, and Andrew, fishing, throwing their nets into the lake. It was their regular work. And Jesus said to them, come with me, I'll make a new kind of fisherman out of you. I'll show you how to catch men and women instead of perch and bass. They didn't ask questions. They simply dropped their nets and followed. Now, I know I've talked about this before, but friend, that is next level commitment. I mean, they left their lives, they left their livelihoods, they left everything and followed Jesus. Now, I know there's some more context to that which we haven't got time to go into, but they weren't just attending what he was doing, they were following him. There was some serious kind of buy-in at this point. They were buying in. They became a part of Jesus' mission. That was incredible. It was wonderful. So I remember when we moved to Victoria, like I'm from Victoria originally, so it wasn't that big a deal. We moved down there in 1991, I think, and to pastor a church, and we were there for about 4 years, and then we came back to Toowoomba. And but when we came back, we got involved in a church in town here, and I started getting quite involved and doing things. And after about 6 months, I think I was doing about 7 different things in the church. And after 6 months or 9 months or whatever it was, they were looking for another staff, a pastor on staff, and they employed me, so I got the job. I actually had been on staff with that church previously before we went to Victoria. But the funny thing about it was, when I went on the staff there, they didn't give me any other jobs. They didn't say, well, now we want you to do this, this, and this, because I was already doing it. The only difference is they started paying me. Okay, so I was already doing that as a volunteer. So the point I'm trying to make here, friends, is that volunteering is a great thing. Now, it can lead to a staff position, but you shouldn't do it for that reason. And I wasn't doing it for that reason. I was just doing it because I was there and I wanted to do it. And it was just a blessing to be a part of what God was doing in that season. So for Lifestream right now, how do we measure how we're going as a church? Well, it's got to be much more than just attendance, And our attendance is okay; it's kind of going up, and that's all right. But we got to use something more meaningful, like engagement, like how engaged are people in the church. That's really, I think, what God is looking for us, and I think there's a couple of common indicators of that. Number one is our life groups. So if people are in a life group, I want to tell you that's a key factor that really helps people. Another one is serving, in serving in the church in some way. They're both indicators of engagement. And I know that these things don't necessarily work for everybody, but I do think it's a really valuable thing. Both those things are indicators of engagement, life groups and serving. And I want you to know that big churches, like really big churches, they are key measures of engagement for big churches as well. So that's a great thing for us. So it's possible to merely attend a life group, but when you're serving in some way in the church, it's very hard to do it and have it just about yourself. It's got to be about others, Serving is always about other people. And I know I told a story before how that when I was a teenager, I got involved in the creative team and at church where we were because I wanted to sit next to someone else who I'm still sitting next to today. I know, that was very selfish. I was serving for the wrong reason, really, but it worked. Hey, it worked. But by and large, the vast majority of times when you're serving, it's not about you, it's about others. It's about blessing other people. And so that's a good thing. That's a really good thing. So here's a litmus test of engagement. If you're a regular member here, and a visitor in the foyer, says to you, well, how do I get involved in this place? What do I do? So here's the question. What would you say to them? So I'm just putting it out there and saying, what would you say to them? If a visitor says to you, hey, what can I do to get engaged? Well, I guess you could get one of these and fill that little card, couldn't you? It would be a start. Okay. Third point, nearly finished. Jesus came to give us a new definition of beginning. That is, where do I start? If I want to, let's say I do want to serve in somewhere, some area, where do I start? Well, the thing is don't just wait for a position to open up, but actually just start wherever you are. Whatever you're doing right now, that's a great place to start serving God. And I read this story a while ago, so powerful, that it happened a long time ago, true story, happened a long time ago. That one night a man was walking to church and he saw these young guys, on the street corner. It was like a night service, and saw these young guys hanging out there. So he invited them to come along, and they went with him. They actually went to church with him. And so they liked it so much that they became the basis of a new sort of call it Sunday school or a kids' church group that they started. And so they kept on coming back, week after week, and they stayed in that church. And years later, the teacher, who was the guy that invited them, the teacher, his friends were putting on a surprise birthday party for their old friend from years ago. And they contacted these four boys to see what happened to them, what became of their life, because they'd all moved on after time. And they were in that Sunday school class for some years. They moved on. So one boy had they invited them to write a letter to be read out to their old friend, the teacher. So one had become a missionary to East Asia. One was president of the Federal Reserve Bank in the US. This is an American story. One was the private secretary to the 31st president of the US, Herbert Hoover. And the fourth was President Hoover himself. So here's the point. You just can't know or imagine what's the ultimate outcome of you contributing and serving other people. You don't know what someone's life journey or their story is going to end up with. You just don't know. But I want to tell you, when you put yourself out there and say, I'm just going to do what I can do, I'm here, what can I do? It's a wonderful thing. And God will use that to bless other people and to be a blessing. It'll be a blessing to you as well. So King David, I'm going to ask our creative team to come back up to the stage again. King David, started out as a delivery boy for his brothers, if you know the story in 1 Samuel. And but at the end of his life, he became one of the greatest kings of all time. At the end of his life, the epitaph on his tombstone read like this. In Acts chapter 13, David, after he'd served his own generation by the will of God. He wasn't there for his own benefit. He served his generation by the will of God. And it's a wonderful thing. And that word served is so powerful when you look into the original language of that, in the Greek that's written in. It means to serve as an under rower, such as would be in a galley, a slave ship. It means huperateo. It means to serve under direct authority, literally as a rower on a slave ship. And David served his generation by the will of God. He was able to humble himself and do that. And I want to encourage you this morning, how to respond to this message. Well, maybe just get one of these volunteer forms that's over there on the back table and tick a box there somewhere and say, what can I do something to help? Or it's even on the back of this other one, you can do the same. How can I help? What can I do? Because I just believe that serving is one of the most powerful things we can do, one of the greatest things we can do. What can I do to help? I used to always say to our kids when they were much younger, a great question, what can I do to help? If you don't know what to do, ask, what can I do to help?